Welcome to TGS, Transform, Grow, Succeed. This podcast is about your work as a caring professional and the ideas that we can share to elevate and expand what we do to ensure that all that we serve get the best of what we have to offer. My name is Dr. Tim Gravoy, and my pronouns are he, him, his, Executive Director of TGS Educational Consulting. I'm excited to introduce just my friend and colleague, Krista Worden, to the show. Krista Worden is a speech-language pathologist, SLP for short, at Grijalva Elementary School, where I used to be principal, and where a dear friend of mine is now the principal there too, in the Tucson Unified School District. She received her Bachelor of Science and Master's degree from the University of Arizona. Krista has been practicing in the field of speech-language pathology for 10 years, 9 of which have been in the public school setting, and currently works with pre-K to 5th grade students with various communication disorders. In addition to managing her caseload, Krista is also a cadre facilitator, of course she is, where she leads monthly professional development for a group of district speech-language pathologists and has supervised graduate students during their practicum in their master's program and in clinical fellowship after graduating. So helping speech-language pathologists learn and grow is also part of what you do, which I think is amazing. So Krista is married to her high school sweetheart, Ryan, and has 2 beautiful children. I've seen them. They are absolutely beautiful. Emery, 6, and Calvin, 4. In Krista's spare time, she enjoys arts and crafts, DIY projects, gardening, and playing tennis. Krista, did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Excellent, excellent. Krista, I invited you on the show today because you have an amazing knack for translating theory into practice and for offering just all children on your caseload just the very best. And I know that there's just a tremendous amount of wisdom that we can gain from you in our conversation today. And I'm just wondering, as we get started, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so as a school speech language pathologist or SLP, I work with many different children, many people on teams, and the areas that I focus on are preventing, assessing, diagnosing, and treating speech, language, and social communication in children.
Preventing. So can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so where I am right now, I see students with IEPs. And when we think of speech language pathology, I work on speech sound production, stuttering, expressive language, receptive language, and pragmatic language. And then I'm also, this year, I've really started incorporating AAC, which is augmentative and alternative communication for students.
And so when we think about that, just in terms of kind of like that prevention kinds of things, like what, I'm just curious, like what are you hoping to prevent?
Hoping to prevent communication disorders.
Oh, I see. I see. Okay. So just there's things that you might be looking for in your assessments or in your connections with students that might be indicative of, if not addressed later on, might progress to something that requires some bigger treatment. And I'm just kind of excited to hear that, because that honestly is something new that I'm learning about that the speech language pathologist can do. I think that's really neat. And so just kind of going with that, then I'm wondering, what do people often get wrong about what SLPs do?
Yeah, so there's a number of things because I feel like people only know like the surface value of what we do. And when people find out that I'm an SLP, their first thought might be, oh, you help kids with their lisp or with stuttering or with their R sound. And these are a big part of what I do, and these are important, but SLPs really have a breadth of knowledge and training for treating communication across the lifespan. So in grad school, we kind of have the opportunity to explore different ages, different settings, and the different settings that we could work in. Schools are a big one, and that's where I primarily have focused. We can do private practice. We can do hospital and rehab facilities. And then the big thing is, pediatric children versus adults. And depending on, what area you want to focus on will kind of guide to where you might end up working. But really, when we go into graduate school or when we come out of graduate school, we have the option. Everybody has the same basic training. And then we can kind of specialize on what we want to focus on.
So I think that makes a lot of sense, that a lot of people might think of, a speech language pathologist is someone who focuses primarily on like articulation goals and things like that. And they probably work with kindergarten students mainly, and they play a lot of games, and all of that is kind of true. But really, there's a huge breadth of practice and scope of practice, really, that just and across the lifespan was something that's really stuck with me. So as you think about just across a lifespan right now, you chose a very particular lifespan. What drew you to the lifespan that you're working with?
I love working with all ages, but really working with children. I have two younger sisters. I nannied when I was younger. So having that experience really helped. And working with kids are so much fun. And before I started in the schools, I was at a outpatient pediatric facility at one of the hospitals in Tucson, and I really enjoyed that. But I did want to kind of get my foot in the door with schools, and I was so lucky to be placed at Grijalva at my school, and I've been there ever since. But one of the things, I mean, I love seeing the improvement that we see with kids. That's probably the driving factor of what I do. But I've been blessed for the team that I have at my school. They really make it so that I want to come back each and every day.
Really, it's a place that I know well, and I just knowing that team, and at least when I was there, and just would have had a chance to see it continue to grow. That team really makes a big difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And then some other things that, misconceptions people might have. And I feel like at the school level, I see this a lot, because, teachers and I was not trained in education, so I don't have that background, but I do know that coming into the school setting, a lot of teachers instantly think speech. And you kind of touched on that earlier, the articulation. But there's really, if we pick that apart, there's lots of different components that we work on. So when we think of speech, the go-to is that speech sound production, how we articulate. We can also work on voice, which is like the quality of our voice, resonance, which, how it sounds with like our nose, our pitch and our loudness. I don't work on that as much in the schools, but it is there. I have the training if it is impacting their education. And then fluency is stuttering. So, when we get stuck, everybody has, some typical disfluencies when we're trying to formulate our thoughts. But there are students, and you might think of some of those that really do, have disruptions in their speech that make it difficult for them to communicate. So that's the speech side. But then the side that a lot of people overlook is the language side. And for me, this is where I really see the connection to the curriculum, because that is my job as a school SLP. I need to tie to the curriculum. So there's 3 different areas when we look at language. So expressive language is how we use language to express ourselves, how we put our thoughts into words. And when I work with students, oftentimes I'll work on like the grammar or syntax, making sure that we're putting words together in the right order, making sure we're not leaving words or parts of words out of our sentences. I've also been focusing really on, like the complexity of our sentences. When you start out young, it's very simple sentences, but as we get older, we're able to combine more ideas into our sentences. And so that's what we call syntactic complexity. We can work on vocabulary. So touching on synonyms and antonyms, growing our vocabulary in those different ways, describing words, defining words. And another area that I've really been trying to touch upon too is like narrative retell. So narratives are a big part of our world. And we use narratives in so many different ways to express ourselves. And in the schools, it's really important that kids have an understanding of narrative structure, because if they don't, understanding stories and then also being able to retell stories, and even just telling them like personal generation, like being able to talk about what they did at school that day, like having that structure is really important. So that's expressive language. And then the flip side to that is receptive language. So receptive language is how we understand our language. And I typically I think of, answering questions, and there's so many types of questions that we can work on. Following directions is a big one too. And I feel like I've been seeing a lot, if you have difficulty attending to or focusing, that has a big impact on how we follow directions, but it is something that we need to think of. And then understanding basic concepts as well. And then pragmatic language is the way that we use our language to interact with others. So think of this as the social language, knowing what to say, when to say, and how to say it. So those, I mean, you think
Four
speech and
flavors. You got
language,
four
but
flavors of language, it sounds like. And just even in thinking about the one that most people will probably commonly associate with SLPs is just the production of language and just, can I say words correctly? Do I have the ability to make the right sounds? But I remember actually one time there was another speech language pathologist who was doing a PD, much the same way that you often do. And she actually mentioned that hoarseness of voice is something that could be a goal. And I was thinking of one of my students that came to school every single day, honestly, sounding like she had a perpetual sore throat at all times. And I'm saying, oh my goodness, I didn't know that this was a thing that we could work together on, because it actually sounded like she would even tell me it would hurt to speak. I mean, otherwise, I don't even know that I would have even thought to care what her voice sounded like, except that she was describing it as uncomfortable. And I realized there was a resource there. But then just even thinking about all those other kinds of language, it's just that there's that expressive, the way that I communicate what's inside my head. How does what's in my brain go through my brain out through my vocal cords, in ways that other people can receive. But then that receptive, how do I understand the language that's being, I guess, languaged at me? Now the pragmatics, I want to actually, if you don't mind, I want to just touch on the pragmatics a bit, because I've just been, surprisingly, I end up getting just a surprising amount of SLPT on just through social media and this, that, and whatever. And there seems to be a bit of controversy about the emphasis on that kind of pragmatic language a bit. And I want to make sure that I'm getting it right. And I'm going to use you as the Rosetta Stone of all SLPs here, completely unfairly. But it seems to be the controversy rests on, yes, pragmatic language is a big part of what we do. Also, it tends to favor neurotypical ways of interacting. And I'm wondering, is this something that you've been exploring at all? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, so we think of neurodiversity and the neurodiversity acceptance and affirming movement, and 100%. It's really important to look at the different ways we communicate. Neurodiverse individuals communicate in different ways. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. They just communicate differently. And so, the big population that we think of are autistic individuals. But also ADHD. I mean, they may have different ways that they communicate as well. And it's important to validate the way that they communicate. We don't want to say that it's wrong, but we need to teach these individuals that there are different communication styles. And I think the big thing is when we're working with these individuals, focusing on how they interpret things is going to be, the important part. But you may have heard, I feel like the big controversy is, eye contact when you're interacting. So pragmatics can be verbal and nonverbal. So like the nonverbal communication, eye contact, body language, making eye contact can be very uncomfortable and even harmful to some individuals. And so it is not my job to change who they are, but it's to help them access their ability to communicate with others to the best that they can. And so it's really important to keep that in consideration.
So I'm wondering too, just how that works out in practice. And I think that would be just something really, oh my goodness, that could be its own podcast, couldn't it? Just the controversy in pragmatics, but just I think eye contact and ADHD and other kinds of neurodiversity. A lot of my work is in supporting students with ADHD, and just as an adult with ADHD myself, coming to understand that there was a lot that I was punished for in schools. It seems to be a feature of lots of people with ADHD, and it just seems to be just like don't interrupt when someone else is telling a story. For example, and but that's how I'm telling you that I am listening, actually, and just learning as I learned as a child that was not favored by neurotypical folks because I was punished for it, but kind of learning as an adult that how to balance that with just, I'm not going to apologize for being who I am any longer. That's not a thing that I do. However, understanding that, yes, this is going to cause a certain kind of feeling in someone. Can I check that somewhat? Actually goes kind of what to the word pragmatic kind of means, right? It just the usefulness of how we interact. That's really giving me a lot to think about. That's really kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I kind of been thinking about all of that. So I had a question, and I want to kind of reframe it a bit. Originally, I was thinking about maybe could you talk about who do you see as your clients? And I do want to talk about it. I do think of it that way. You know what? Let's go for it. Let's just do it that way, and let's see where we end up here. As you think about the clients on your caseload, do you see the clients as your list, your roster? Do you see your clients more expansively than that? Or when you think about who really are the people that you serve, how do you view that?
Yeah. So when you first asked me that, my first thought are the students that I directly work with. But then when we think of the students, I can break that down into different components. So there are the students, like you said, on my list, on my roster, students that I provide direct services according to their IEP. But then I also have some students where, we're trying to, as a district and even just nationwide, realizing that not all students need direct services. They don't need to be pulled from the classroom every time. I can be a consultative member on the team. And so in those cases, I'm working more with the team, the IEP team for that student, providing accommodations and materials that might help. They can pick my brain, if they're working on something that I somehow, connect with. And then I also think of just students in general. Our school has a great MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, that there are students who are falling behind, in academically. And when we think with the academics, language really plays a part into academics. So oftentimes students with language impairment also have academic difficulties. And vice versa. You might see sometimes, well, we know this student is, has, a specific learning disability or other health impairment, but language might be at play. And even for kids that haven't been diagnosed yet, but we have, the way that I can play into that is I can help support the MTSS team. And so I've been working on that, especially this last year. Our MTSS facilitator and I have been coordinating, I'm trying to help come up with goals that they can work on, maybe, and this year we've really been focusing on comprehension, when we think of the stories that they have to answer, questions to, and then retelling those stories. So it was back in February, I gave a professional development at Grijalva on narrative instruction and how teachers can be doing that as well. So I guess that kind of ties to my second, not as aware, client would be teachers. And so that's something that I've been trying to get better and better at, is teaming with teachers, giving them tips, suggestions, lots of visual support. I've used my laminator and Velcro so much this year. But how can I support students with these teachers in their classroom? And then I would also say families are probably one of my other clients indirectly. I'm supposed to meet with them at least once a year when we review our IEP, but oftentimes in those meetings, they might be asking me questions like, well, how can we work on this? Or what would you recommend? I think when I first started, I gave homework, in speech homework, but I've kind of scaled back from that. And that's something that our school has kind of done as well. But yeah, if parents have questions, I try to give them as many resources as they can too, because speech and language does not just happen in the school. That is one thing that we can easily say is across all settings. We communicate. That is part of being human. So.
So you have a really broad range of folks that you're thinking about, and I just love the kind of expansive view that you take. And we'll take a break right now. And when we come back, I think I would like to talk about just this idea of teachers as clients and families as clients a little bit more, if that's all right. All right, fantastic. Well, let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more with Krista Worden, speech language pathologist in Tucson Unified School District, about that expansive client roster she's got. This message is from the Arizona Speech Language and Hearing Association, a professional organization for Arizona audiologists, SLPs, and SLPAs. I hope you can all join us at the annual ARSHA conference in Tucson, Arizona on April 12th and 13th. Come hear our keynote speaker, Dr. Hines, discuss designing a tapestry of diversity and harnessing the power of AI. There are so many talented speakers, including Marie Ireland on speech sound acquisition and Dr. Terry Bellis on auditory processing. Register online at www.arsha.org. So welcome back. Krista, we were talking about just this idea of who do you see as your clients? And you were talking about how, yes, of course, you have the students that are on your roster for whom you provide direct services, but you also have a really expansive client list that includes families and includes teachers. As you think about, just one thing that actually you and I have in common, I also see teachers very much as my clients these days, and certainly did as a school leader, as principal, for sure I did. And I'm wondering, just from your perspective, what is the relationship between your goals for students and the goals that a classroom teacher for your students might be for those students that you share?
Yeah, so as a school-based SLP, the services that I provide are solely based on the student's educational need. So that is the goals that I work on in the IEP have to be tied directly to state standards for each grade level. And that's a difference between school-based services and like private practice speech language therapy services. So that's, where my brain goes first when I think of how is it connected. It's directly connected. But then I also kind of think about, when I've worked with teachers, I also try to help, take some of what they're working on. I'm thinking of a fourth grade teacher that I worked with years ago. And they were, doing different books. And I said, hey, send me your vocabulary list. I have access to this great software program called Lesson Picks, where I can use it to make visual support. And so it's like, send me that. We can, I can come up with like a memory game to work on the definition and the word, or a synonym and the target word that the students are working on. So yeah, that's one way that I kind of think of how I kind of work into the classroom a little bit, tied to the curriculum. Trying to think if there's anything else.
Well, it sounds like, so one of the things is you can actually just those language goals that relate to kind of expressive and receptive language and all of the ways that communication happens. That's, for goodness sakes, like communication is, you could think of it kind of as the medium of teaching and learning to a certain degree. It's the way that an adult is going to interact with a child with whatever content is going on, right? There's that relationship happens somehow, and it's language. Wow, I'm getting more philosophical than expected, but it's language that really is the medium of that. So in the cosmic sense, how could you not be connected to the goals that a teacher goes? But then in that very granular way, just, you got vocabulary, let's do it. You want to talk about narrative structure, I know for a fact that is an ELA standard, across elementary grades. So it seems directly connected. What are just some things that maybe that you do that are important to support communication, but it's not so obviously aligned as you got your vocabulary words, I'm a help. It might be connected in that, just in the sense that language is the medium of learning, but it might not feel as super duper connected to the standard that the teacher might be working on this week.
Yeah, I kind of think like when I'm working with speech sound production, articulation, that really has a direct tie with phonological, phonemic awareness and learning how to read. So, I have some students that Some have academic services and some do not. But when I'm working on the speech sound production, I might have a student that's working on, they omit the final sound, final consonant deletion. And so when we are practicing these things, I'm going to have a picture of the target word. I'm going to have the word itself. I'm going to be overemphasizing, let's put all of our sounds together, at, cat, and mark it that way. So that's like maybe one that might not be as, apparent. Grammar, working on combining words together. Gosh, there's so many.
Yeah, you're describing two things that sound like just laser focus on exactly things that I would want my students to be really good at.
Mhm.
When I'm thinking about just that emerging literacy skills, just wherever students are, that very often reading fluency, one big stump to that is just not having that capability of taking those individual sounds and putting them together into a word, and to getting fluent enough at it that we don't need to go through that mental process every single time we encounter that same word. And that I'm wondering if perhaps it is maybe there isn't that much that you do that doesn't tremendously support our classroom teachers. And of course that just makes sense. And so I'm wondering, I'm asking you to be just a little bit vulnerable because when I'm talking about school leaders, and you've been at Grijalva for as long as you've been a school-based speech language pathologist, and when you were first there, I was a school leader, and now there's an amazing school leader who's a dear friend of mine, Megan Chavez, who's there now too. So I just want to be aware just of what I'm asking you to navigate in these next 2 years. But just knowing Megan the way that we both of us do, I don't think it's going to be super hard for you to answer. But you can also just thinking about not just your own experience, but also just the experience of perhaps SLPs in your cadre or in the other colleagues that you've got as you're talking shop. What difference does having a supportive school leader or principal kind of make to your work?
So having a supportive school leader can make or break your experience in the school, coming from an SLP point of view. I've heard a lot from other SLPs on Facebook, even within my district, the challenges that they might face if leadership doesn't value or understand what SLPs do and how we have an impact on a school. But fortunately, I have not experienced that. I've been so lucky with having you, Tim, when I first started at Grijalva, now having Megan. You guys really understand, first of all, special education in general, and then also the role that I play. I feel like I've been very valued, and people come to me, with advice and for expertise in these areas. So that's I think the biggest thing, having acknowledgement. Let's see. And recently, so I think I had said before, I've been working with my MTSS facilitator to target, expressive and receptive language interventions. When we sat down with Megan and we're talking about, we found like a screener, and progress monitoring. It's called the Cubed assessment. They have wonderful free resources. But we were,
Free is great.
Yes, free is great. But so we were looking at just the assessment part. And then, they came to me and were like, okay, what do we do for intervening on this? And that was something I've been doing a little more research into. And through the same company, we've looked at curriculum that maybe we can start using school-wide, to address these areas where our students are lacking in narrative intervention. And so just taking, the things that I have experience in and knowledge in and being able to apply that on a school-wide level is great. It makes me really feel like I'm part of a team. And that's, I think, another thing that some SLPs, and I think it's a little different for me because I'm at my school 5 days a week. Whereas there might be other SLPs that are itinerant and they only, maybe they're at one school 1 to 2 days a week and at another school. So I think it's harder to be part of the community when you're not there as often. But I think, if school leaders can, find that way to bring those SLPs and really make them part of the team, even if they're just there a few days a week, I think it'll have a tremendous impact on how that SLP feels, and they're going to be more willing and wanting to help the school. Because yeah, we really do have a lot that we can offer the school setting.
So there's a lot to unpack there, and a lot of really beautiful stuff to unpack. And there's a couple of just points I wanted to hit on, if that's all right. And the first one is just you had an idea that you knew would be really, really good for students, and not just good for a few, but you wanted to have your audience way beyond your own roster. You wanted the audience for this intervention to be the entire school. And so when you came to Megan with that idea and that willingness to help and to step in and do all of these things, you're not meeting resistance, you're meeting encouragement and support. And okay, sounds great, let's schedule. Versus, oh, we need to explore this a bit more. And when that happened, when you got that go ahead to implement a good idea that you knew was going to be good for kids, that felt supportive, is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the reason why it's such an interesting connection is actually my most recent guest actually quit public education entirely and started her own school because she was tired of good ideas not making it to classrooms. She was tired of always running into resistance from the principal for things that she knew were good for kids. And so it just seems like that's a really important thing for school leaders to think about as we think about like retention, as we think about the ways that we communicate. It's just that so often our job as school leaders is really to put the brakes on things and make sure we're doing things slowly and intentionally, methodically. However, the consequence of the evil twin of that could very well be that we've got a great idea. There's no reason not to go forward with it. We've got capable professionals ready to implement. Just let it happen, please. And that has not been your experience. It sounds like it's hearsay, which is really just speaks a lot to Megan and who's been on the show, by the way, listeners. You should definitely check out her interview too. So I guess that kind of ties into this next question too. And because I want to kind of go to that thought about itinerant speech language pathologists as well, because because that actually might speak to kind of our OTs and PTs and other kind of folks that we might not have like a whole caseload for at a school, and we might not see a lot, but nevertheless we couldn't really get through our day without them when it comes down to it. So so we talked about kind of that specific intervention that you and your MTSS coordinator wanted to implement. What other ways have you just absolutely concretely felt Megan's support, your school leader support as you go about your job?
I think in terms of scheduling, like understanding that like as an SLP, we often work 40, 50, 60, sometimes even more students per school for our caseload. So kind of giving us grace when it comes to trying to schedule. That's a big challenge at the beginning of the year, and something that I'm kind of facing right now with one of my resource teachers. Now, we're going into the fourth quarter, but there were some schedule changes. And so we have to kind of almost start from scratch. But some, even what I love that they do is they help put together like a master schedule. And like, so it's easy for us to find all the times like at once. That's something that probably would get overlooked, but that one little thing can make a huge impact on just our ability to sit down and try to figure out when we can help support these students.
Yeah, so that the master schedules are pretty common at middle and high schools, or at least just because of the period structure of the day. And at elementary schools, there are some principals who are really into it, and some principals who are really not, and some staff that are really into the idea of having a consistent schedule, and some staff that are not. And I just one thing that Megan and I both kind of landed on was, you know what? We're going to get more done with all of our team if we have some at least something that looks consistent there. And so it's just thanks for bringing that up. That just that those simple, it really is simple. I mean, it's not simple to make a master schedule,
Yeah.
but there's some real amazing benefits that it has to our related service providers, like our speech language pathologists, our resource teachers, our occupational therapists, and things like that, that are just really just concrete support and make it less crazy making. And it sounds like just conversely, having gigantic changes to the master schedule in the middle of the year would probably not be helpful
Yeah.
for supports to getting those speech units in. So,
Yeah.
do you have any colleagues in your cadre who are itinerant teachers, itinerant speech language pathologists? And are there things that you think would be helpful for principals to kind of know about that kind of flavor of relationship that perhaps they could increase the connection between their school community and perhaps a traveling SLP?
Yeah, and my particular, so the way that our cadres work, I think because we have a lot of SLPs in our district, we have over 60. And so our cadres are broken up. I think there's 8 different cadres, and each cadre has around 8 to 10 members in each. So in my particular cadre, most of the SLPs I think are at one school. There might be a couple that are only maybe at 2. So that's, a little more manageable. But I think, at the beat when they first start, like just taking that time. I remember when I started with you, Tim, like just sitting down and like having a meeting, getting to know the SLP, just building that connection there, I think is important. And like, if you have questions, I'm here. So I would say don't skip over that. And whether that be at the beginning of the year or if, sometimes,
Why not right now? If it hasn't
yeah,
happened, why not right now?
exactly.
So I love that. So I think that actually would be a great thing. And and I have to be honest, I can't take credit for that. There's actually some amazing school leaders in District 63 in Niles, Illinois, that I was just surrounded by this community of just really just with it school leaders and just amazing folks. And one of the things that I didn't learn in principal school that I definitely learned from them is say hello to substitute teachers every single morning and personally walk them to the door. Say hello to all of your traveling staff that aren't going to see you at the PD because they're never scheduled on that day. Like make sure that the first time you need them for something, the first time you talk to them isn't when you need them for something. And I'm glad that you found that supportive, and I know for a fact that Megan absolutely is this way. And actually, she just is so naturally thoughtful. It's just beautiful for sure. Well, let's take a break then. And when we come back, we'll have a final thought from Krista Worden, speech language pathologist at Tucson Unified School District. Creating inclusive classrooms for students with ADHD is the perfect short online course to learn how to transform the school experience for students with ADHD and to enhance your ability to support their learning. You'll discover evidence-based strategies to improve the social, emotional, and academic success of students with ADHD, even without formal treatment plans or special accommodations. By the end of this course, you'll have an in-depth understanding of ADHD and its impact on learning, how to advocate effectively for students with ADHD, learn how to provide frequent prompts and positive feedback, some amazing strategies that'll reduce unhelpful behaviors and encourage helpful ones, and respond to symptoms of ADHD in a way that enhances connection, reduces teacher frustration, and boosts student success. It's an amazing course, and I hope to see you there. Well, welcome back, Krista. It's been absolutely great to talk to you today. And we've covered a tremendous amount of ground. And I've definitely, I thought I knew what SLPs did. I don't think I did a bad job of that, but I feel like it has expanded and become much more comprehensive because of our time together today. Thank you. That is just a tremendous gift. So just given all the ground that we've covered, though, I'm wondering what final thought might you have for us?
Yeah, I would say don't hesitate to reach out to your SLP. Get to know them. We went into this field to help people. And so we went to be there for you. We went to help you. We went to make the school a better place for our students to learn. And that's not just with working with the students, but also making those connections with staff as well.
So get to know your speech language pathologist, get to know who they are, and when there's an opportunity to connect and work together and receive some support, just know that your SLP is probably only too happy to do it and can't wait. Krista, I think that's beautiful. Thank you so much. Krista, thanks for being here today, and just thanks to you for sharing your experience with the listeners today. And listeners, I hope you enjoyed our show. I definitely hope you reach out to me or to Krista with your thoughts in our conversation. You can find Krista on Instagram at slps.in.a.pod. So SLPs in a pod. And you can find me on Instagram at TGS Educational Consulting and at www.tgseducationalconsulting.com. And both of us are absolutely grateful for your likes, follows, comments, and shares, both here on YouTube and on Instagram. And until next time, may all of us, and you, our listeners especially, have many opportunities to be as good and generous with yourself as you are with those you serve.